Welcome, everyone, to this Professional Development Hour presentation brought to you proudly by the Atlanta Metro chapter of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, an affiliate of the National Society of Professional Engineers. Before we begin, we'd like to let you know that any opinions presented tonight are solely the opinions of the presenter and not that of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, the National Society of Professional Engineers, or any other of its affiliates. We certainly hope you will enjoy tonight's presentation, so sit back and relax. And on with the show.
All right, everyone, we have a great presentation for you today. The name of the presentation is North Georgia Water, the History, Current Climate Conditions, Challenges, Opportunities. We'll be taking a look at the history of the metropolis, water successes and challenges, and the infrastructure vulnerabilities, future goals, and impediments. Our presenter today is Ben Vermont. He's a proud 9th generation North Georgian. Wow. Earned a bachelor's, master's degrees from Kennesaw State University, and while working as a wastewater design consultant for 5 years, he's also taught fluid mechanics in the fluid mechanics lab at KSU. Benjamin started in Garver, Georgia, operations just 3 years ago, and has grown the Atlanta office to 17 professionals, serving many cities and counties across North Georgia. And as one of the region's leading multidisciplinary engineering, planning, and environmental services firms, Garver works each day to help our communities with 55 offices nationwide, taking on what's next. So, without further ado, please join me in giving Benjamin a warm welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate y'all coming tonight. I think it's awesome that there's a group of people that actually care about these things that I'm about to talk about, because when I kept going through it with my family over the weekend, nobody cared but me. So it's kind of my favorite thing about presenting to engineers. I recognize a lot of these faces in the crowd today from my younger engineer years of spending a lot of time with societies. But a lot of you don't know who I am, and I'm talking about big things, right? So normally I would just go straight into the topics, but I did feel the need to kind of explain a little bit about who I am and in what context I'm coming at this presentation from, because these are big topics that are affecting us and are likely going to affect us even more here in the future. So introduction to me, this is my wife, Gina Moss. She works for Bartow County Water Department. She's a water engineer for them, and these are our two lovely kids. We live in the Battery area. Mentioned in the intro, I'm a 9th generation Georgian, North Georgia. My family comes from Paulding County, Dallas, Georgia area, and I am very happy to be serving my home. I love our state. I love North Georgia. I love our country. For that matter, and the fact that I get a chance to work in water wastewater is really the pleasure of my life. Early on in my career, I got a job in 2010 through the American Society of Civil Engineers. I was the president at Southern Poly while I was there, and then moved into the Georgia board under the younger members with John back in the day. And I got a chance to travel to all interior 48 states. I've never been to Alaska and Hawaii. I'm going to Alaska hopefully next year with my great-grandmother, and then I'm saving Hawaii for when my knees give out, because you can scuba dive at any age with no knees. But through those travels, I was a consultant for Coca-Cola, Pepsi, General Electric. I can talk about these things now because my NDAs have ran out. Later on, there's things I can't talk about because I do have active NDAs related to the jobs that I've worked on, so I'm going to have to talk a little bit high level. But one of my favorite things about traveling, I've been on over 600 flights, I've been in every major U.S. city, I've spent significant time in those states. I was young, and during the Great Recession, that's just what we had to do to have a job, and we were very lucky to work under a professional engineer to get to your professional engineer license. But every single city that I flew to and I visited, I figured out what built that city. Was it industry? Was it a captain of industry? Was it a school? Was it the interstate system? Was it an airport? Was it a waterway? Why was that city developed? And then I was working within that city. I was going to learn as much about it because I knew when I came back that it would benefit me. And I will tell you right now that a lot of the perspectives that I'm bringing is from seeing cities in the Northeast. I wrote out Sandy in New York. I have seen infrastructure in the Northeast. I have seen infrastructure in the Seattle, Washington area and in the suburbs of Seattle, Washington, California, Texas, all across. There are positives and negatives to every single one of these places, but every place has unique challenges, and Atlanta is not any different from that. They just are unique challenges. So the next thing I'm going to tell you about is who Garver is. That's the company I represent. About 3 years ago, I was employee number 1 at Garver. I bounced around a little bit in my career, and I established the Garver offices a little less than 3 years ago, and we're up to actually 22 professionals. We got John Gonzalez in the back, one of our new members of Garver. And as you can see here, these are where our offices are located, but over here, and you can't really see it well in this presentation, but you can see a lot better on the screen, we're working for multiple municipalities across North Georgia. I only work for governments. I do not work for private developers. I just work for municipal governments because I feel like in order to do my job as a water, wastewater engineer inside of Georgia and the North Georgia area, that if I work for the developers, there's a little bit of a conflict of interest there. So I've made a choice that I don't do that, but people that work for developers, no harm, no foul. I think you play a very important role, but I only work for governments, and that's what we do. And so in these 3 years, I'll tell you a little bit about a project at the very end of the presentation, but we actually have the first intake on the Chattahoochee River south of Atlanta since we've been keeping records of public water supply withdrawals that's north of Columbus. Now there is one for Fort Benning and Columbus, but outside of that, there is nothing north. She was to Union City a minute ago. South Fulton Authority has received a permit, but they haven't built anything yet. We're just downstream of that. And so these things that are happening inside of Atlanta are very important to the clients that I represent, the state. I currently am the trustee, junior trustee of the Georgia American Waterworks Association. And that rolls into a 4-year cycle for the chair. ACE 2028, anybody familiar with the ACE conference? It's the American Waterworks National Conference. It's called ACE. They do it every year. It rotates in different cities. In 2028, we will actually be hosting that in Atlanta. And so we're already getting ready for preparations for that. In my non-existent free time, I am currently I was elected as the basin chair for the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District, which is an entity up under the Atlanta Regional Commission. Anybody familiar with the Atlanta Regional Commission? All right, so underneath that is the Metro District. They come up with all kinds of things related to water. I, on my free time, not with Garver, am the chair of the Chattahoochee Basin. The Chattahoochee is very important to me. I love that river. I have recreated in that river since I was a little baby. My ancestors recreated in that river, and so I take it really serious, all the things that are happening along the Chattahoochee River. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. Lastly, I just rolled off as the water treatment chair for the Georgia Association of Water Professionals, very active inside of that, where we did a lot of stuff with PFAS. We did a national workshop where we had people come in from South Africa, professors down there. We had people come in from London, from different consultants to come in and present here in Georgia on what's going on with PFAS. We were leading in that, and we're continuing to try to stay ahead of all things related to that. So with that, I would love for this to be a dialogue and a conversation. Things come up that you have questions about, feel free to ask. If I can answer it short, I will. I'll answer it immediately. If not, then we could talk afterwards. But with that, I will go ahead and start jumping into. So, looks like I left a title on the left, so don't worry about that. On the right-hand side, this is going to talk about our agenda. First, we're going to talk a little bit about how Metro Atlanta developed relative to water. We're just going to talk about the water things. I got a lot of stories. Most of this stuff comes from Franklin Garrett's Atlanta and Environs book. Anybody here familiar with that book? Yeah, Franklin Garrett was a historian for a really, really long time in Atlanta. The books are long and they're crazy, but guess what happened during COVID? UGA opened up their entire library to where you could download things, so that you could, during COVID, you could just look through things. So what I did is I downloaded all three, or both volumes of the book, put it inside of a PDF, and then control find for everything related to water, everything related to wastewater, everything related to supply, and went through and chronicled different history of what was going on inside of Atlanta. Additionally, there's another book that's floating around here. I have left it sitting somewhere, called Thirsty City. Yeah, I wanted to share it. I do not have an actual physical copy of Atlanta Environs because it's huge and it's expensive. But I do have this. This is Thirsty City. I would also recommend this book. Pretty good. So I'm taking a lot of the history out of those two books. These are not things that I went and read the archives and all that stuff. So I just want to be really clear that all I'm doing is presenting information that I think is interesting, that might give you a little bit more context the next time you're watching the news about what's going on in the city or in the North Georgia area when it's related to water. And then lastly, I've got these really cool history books of some different pictures inside of Atlanta. I'm going to leave these over here in case anybody wants to take a picture of them or look through them. So then the next thing I'm going to talk about is the eventfulness of 2024. There's been some few things that have happened, and that's what we're going to talk about. I think we'll get there. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about the current state of things and maybe some things that we could do inside of this room as professional engineers in order to make the world a better place. Talked a little bit to Roger about this on the phone. With my ASCE involvement over the years, I loved the story of is it the Tahoma Bridge? Is that right? The Tahoma Bridge with resonance frequency that collapsed, and that's the ring. Is that right? Did I get it right? Tahoma Harris, right. So for those who don't know the story, Tahoma Harris is a bridge in Washington. Resonance frequency of the wind hit the bridge was shaken. Only a dog died, but one dog is enough to make a ring and promise. But us as professional engineers, I take it very seriously, our role in all this, so I'm going to try to frame it as engineers of what we can do. But if you haven't seen The Oath of the Engineer and been a part of that, it's definitely something really special that I encourage all of my staff and everybody that's an upcoming engineer to really take to heart, because at the end of the day, we have our own Hippocratic Oath, right? And that's to public health and safety of all the people that we represent. So history doesn't repeat. I think history rhymes. But we have to go into the history in order to figure out some things. And hey, history is flavored by the victor, right? It's just to the best of the knowledge you have. So I'm just going to keep prefacing that this is just the information that I've been exposed to that I'm passing back along to you. So Atlanta, originally the terminus, then Marthasville, which eventually became Atlanta. So in 1837, the terminus was established of the Western Atlantic Railroad. Anybody know what the Western Atlantic Railroad was? I heard this like a million times, right? But as I was going through the presentation, I was like, what is this railroad? I'd always heard it was the railroad down the Appalachian Mountain, which would connect and go westward. Turns out that's not the case. And in the next slide, I show a little bit of picture. It is actually to connect the Tennessee River with Atlanta. Why? Why would we want to connect the Tennessee River to Atlanta? Anybody? I'm more professional, huh?
Water.
No. Close though. Well, sort of, actually. Water for transporting goods. Where does the Tennessee River go? To the Mississippi. Where does the Mississippi go?
To the Gulf.
To the ocean, right? And then from the ocean, you can go a lot of places, right? So at its core, what as engineers do? We provide the ability to move transportation or move goods, and water was the major way. Who here knew that when they started to dredge the Chattahoochee River, that they almost put a port in Atlanta? Anybody know that? Yeah. So that was in the original proposals, that the Corps was going to dredge from the Apalachicola Bay all the way up to Atlanta to set a port there. And the railroad from the Tennessee River up to back down to Atlanta was in order to get the goods across the two different waterways, because at the time it was far more efficient to transport goods by water than other forms. In 1843, it was renamed Marthasville after the daughter of the governor, and then in 1847, it was renamed Atlanta. So the big thing on this is that Atlanta was not set up because it was a great place for humans to live. It was set up because it was a great place to put a railroad. The intercontinental divide is located at Atlanta. So if you take and you pour a water bottle in the place I'm going to show you in the middle, half of that water goes to the Gulf of Mexico, and the other half of that water goes to the Atlantic Ocean. And even there's even more watersheds that split off. Where I'm from in Paulding County, there's 3 watersheds right there. The Tallapoosa River, which combines with the Etowah, Coosa, and then goes to Montgomery, and then goes into the Bay of Mobile, where our family vacations in Gulf Shores, Mississippi. And then the other piece of the water goes from South River and Entrenchment Creek into the Atlantic Ocean. Sorry, I got confused, my bad. In Paulding County, there's a Tallapoosa River, there's the Etowah, and then the Chattahoochee. And the Chattahoochee goes down into where the border between Alabama, Georgia, and Florida is, and then eventually goes into the Apalachicola Bay. So just in that little area, that's what makes it special. And you can't see this at all on this map here, but this is actually the original Western Atlantic Railroad, and here is Atlanta on the Chattahoochee, where they were going to a ferry location. A common ferry location on the Chattahoochee, and up there is actually Tennessee. And in this, there's a whole bunch less counties I was going to show you as well. So, jumping into Atlanta and its environs, a chronicle of its people and events. It was published in 1954, and then again, volume 2 was published in 1969. In the 1850s, Atlanta's water source was artesianal wells, and that was located adjacent to 5 Points. Not little 5 Points, but 5 Points downtown. And what is an artesianal well? What it means is you could shove a pipe in the ground, and the water will go upward, because there's pressure underneath the ground that will force the water up. That's a great solution for 100,000 people maybe. I don't know the safe yield, but it sure as heck ain't a solution for 1 million people. So it was only a short period of time before they started thinking about it. So between 1850 and 1875, there was a lot of conversation inside of Atlanta City Hall about privatization. Sound familiar? We're going to talk a little bit about what happened with Bill Campbell and all the stuff with privatization in Atlanta. These things rhyme and repeat. They fought for many years about how it was going to work. Should they do the Atlanta Works? There was actually a canal company that was established that they were going to try to dredge and bring in water from different areas because they knew it was a water issue. Eventually, the city council decided and came together, and they established there was going to be a new water source, and they were going to do it on the Chattahoochee River. And so in 1892, they commissioned it, and they started building it, and they completed it in 1895. And we're going to talk a little bit about that site and where it's located. Just a little picture of Atlanta in the 1800s. Again, you can't see it super well. This is the only picture, and this repeats over and over again. I will say, anybody that's spent any time on YouTube looking at history, there are a lot of crazy theories out there. Anybody can post anything on YouTube, so just be very careful. But there's a lot of conversation about which photos are real and like what time frame. So I just wanted to caveat with that, is that this is a picture we think was located in 5 Points, showing the original water supply inside of City of Atlanta. And if you can go and look up this image online, incredible. A cool history. You can see all the different rivers and streams. I was going to point them all out here. Down here is in the south, the river area. You can see what happens is the roadways are based on the ridge lines. Why? Anybody know why? Because if you ever go hiking or mountain climbing, the hardest part is doing switchbacks to get up to elevation. But once you're at elevation, you walk the ridges. So you can basically still in Atlanta look at the roads, and you can generally see the breakdown of the watersheds. And this is common almost in every single county throughout. So inside of Franklin Garrett's book, he lists that Atlanta Waterworks' headquarters was actually located at South River Water Reclamation Facility. So that was the original location. There's definitely conflicting reports out there about where the original one was. Some people have reported it's Hemp Hill, but Atlanta Waterworks was established prior to Hemp Hill, so I don't know, but I do know this, is that I was there starting up the digesters while I was at South River, and this is the original house that the plant manager for South River actually lived in. So back in the day, that's where the plant managers would actually live at the places they work. And in fact, Clayton County still has original houses near one of their plants, and they still will rent that out to their operators that operate the plants because they have to be available. And I'll stop right here to say, if you don't know too much about water and wastewater, I love our linemen that get up and fix the power when it goes out, but you probably have not thought about the water operators that deliver your clean water whenever things go bad, and the wastewater operators that keep our rivers clean. We do a lot to recognize our operators, but 2 Christmases ago when we had that freeze, those ladies and gentlemen worked from basically Christmas past New Year's, finding all the breaks and trying to keep your water online so you were enjoying your holiday season. And they really do love the fact that you don't think about your water. That is the kind of people that our water and wastewater operators are, and it's a really special thing, and we should be celebrating them more as a society, but that's okay. But this is that original building they lived in, and then unfortunately it's been demolished, so you can't see it too well here, but this is actually a new primary clarifier that's being constructed. Primary clarifier that's being constructed for the wastewater treatment facility at South River, and it actually recently got demolished. So this history goes away if we don't make an effort to preserve it. So a review of Peachtree Creek and how we established the point of withdrawal from the Chattahoochee. So right here on the right, you're seeing all the different watersheds located inside of City of Atlanta, and here I'm going to have to look down here to see the actual, yeah, so this is Entrenchment Creek, and this is South River that I was referring to. These two go to the Atlantic Ocean. Everything over here goes to the Chattahoochee River, which then goes into the Gulf of Mexico, okay? So if you're looking at this area, this is where Peachtree Creek is, and here is a little bit of a zoom in on that. This is where the North Fork and the South Fork converge and then go into the Chattahoochee River. So in this area right over here, you're seeing Druid Hills, right? And what's in Druid Hills? What famous university? Okay, does anybody know who was on the board for Emory University when it was established that has a famous last name in Atlanta? Asa Candler. His son was on the board when they established Emory University. Asa Candler's family was all living in the Druid Hills area, which is near the headwaters of Peachtree Creek, a very famous area. In that area, just another fun story about Atlanta, they had an exotic zoo down by the bottom, if you've ever been in the atrium area of Emory, and they moved all those animals to Grant Park, and that actually became Zoo Atlanta. Also, another fun fact, Candler Field, which then became Atlanta Hartsfield Inter-Jackson Airport, was also owned by Asa Candler, which is the headwaters of South River. So the man owned 2 headwaters. Why? What is Coca-Cola? 99% water. So if you want to be able to sell your product, what do you need? Water. Right? Yeah, man was not dumb with all the things he did. So anyway, that's Peachtree Creek. When it flows in, guess where that intake is? Just north of there. Why? We don't want to drink our poop. It's obvious, right? Guess what? Here's a fun fact. You already drink everybody else's poop upstream. Yeah. A lot of our water in Georgia is already, they don't call it technically indirect potable reuse, but there's wastewater going in upstream and in insignificant quantities. We'll talk about where those are in just a minute. But that's why they established the point up there. Ton of conversation about it for years. They talked about damming up the Chattahoochee or the mountain stream long before Buford Dam was there. That was one of the solutions that was presented to solve Atlanta's water problem very early on. So this is a view of the Chattahoochee River Pump Station. And you can see that there's a little dam here a little bit. There's actually an old house here, and they have they had the original house there for this ferry passing that you can go look at. It's not, I think it's gated here now, so maybe you can't reach it now with the gate. I can't remember, but there's definitely there if you ever can get a visit to it. And right here is where the screens are located, and they're Evoqua or Avivo screens. They're rake screens on the side of the river, and then right here is actually the laboratory building for City of Atlanta, and this actually goes down this actually goes down a really long way and then connects back to the old tunnel. Operating from 1895, and there's a 5-story approximately spiral staircase down to the very bottom of it for the people that are a little bit more I guess looking for a thrill. I will say though, there's an elevator that's far more spooky that I actually chose to go down the spiral staircase because I was more afraid of the elevator. But so what you're looking at here actually is the start of the tunnel shaft. So we'll talk a little bit more in a minute about the Bellwood Quarry and how that improved Atlanta's water supply. But this is actually the access point, the first access point to the tunnel that goes over to the Bellwood Quarry and then and over to Hemp Hill. Fun fact, City of Atlanta has actually bid out the construction for this new Chattahoochee pump station that is replacing the 1895. There's been little improvements, but a lot of it's original, 3 times, and they've never actually awarded the contract. Yeah, and so there's a lot of things related to that I could go into if this wasn't on YouTube. All right, so a view of Hemp Hill currently. So you have 2 reservoirs for Hemp Hill, and then you have the filters, or sorry, the flocculation, which for those who are not super familiar with water treatment, generally speaking, the water comes in, we hit it with a pre-oxidant to get things out of solution so that we can readily settle it out. Then we hit it with what's called a flocculant, a coagulant, and then we flocculate it to form bigger pieces, and then we settle those out, and then we separate it. Then the clean water keeps going, then it goes through filtration, then we hit it with disinfectant and then fluoride, and then we send it out. And so right here we're going to talk a little bit more about the break, but I feel like it was good to give some context really early. This is the Hemp Hill pump station. This pump station supplies a lot of water. I'm not going to give you exact figures because I didn't reach out to the City of Atlanta to get exact figures in 2024, but it's a big pump station and supplies a lot of water inside of the City of Atlanta. And City of Atlanta does not have a lot of booster pump stations. So this pump station is really important. We'll go into the news and what was going on in June, but this is what they were talking about when they were saying turning up and down those pumps. That's located inside of that building. And then this is the full complex. So up here is the Chattahoochee intake, and the tunnel is moving this way. This is a massive complex full of all kinds of treatment. So this right here is the wastewater treatment plant. You've got the water treatment plant here. This is the Chattahoochee water treatment plant. You have Cobb County assets. You have City of Atlanta assets. This is just a really important spot that has established over the last 100 years for a lot of water-related items inside of the City of Atlanta. So continuing on with Atlanta and its environs, in the early 1900s, wastewater ditches to Imhoff tanks. So we talk about this a lot, and it still is a real thing today as we go out into new areas and develop. It's called the water sewer lag. Anybody heard of that? Okay, water is revenue. So the government has a direct incentive to add customers on the water side, right? You have a direct incentive to build infrastructure to deliver water because those are customers. Customers are great because they pay bills, but they're also really important for bonding. So if you have customers that you can spread the cost of any capital projects or things like that, it's very important for bonding. You have to think of governments from a funding standpoint different than a person. You don't have to, actually. You can think whatever you want to think. I think that you should think of government's finances different than person. So when I hear somebody say, balance the budget, well, sorry, governments don't die. Well, they do eventually, but like hopefully thousands of years later. Guess what they also do? They don't retire. They don't have to prepare for retirement. They need debt. They need debt to operate, to keep the system moving, because if you built the Chattahoochee pump station right now, that they built in 1953 for Cobb County Marietta Water Authority, which was $2 million, it would be $70 million. So with inflation and things moving, you must keep investing in infrastructure along the way, or you're going to end yourself in problems just like what we're talking about. Governments don't die, hopefully, and they don't retire. So their finances are different. So the water side, you build assets, you deliver more customers, more bonding capacity, and then you have to worry about the wastewater. That's just kind of how it works. We've tried to like reduce that latency as much as possible, but it's just sort of one of those fundamentals. We are doing a better job these days of charging for wastewater, but I'm sorry, a lot of people are really upset every time they have a new bill. I live in Cobb County, my taxes are too low. My water bill is too small. That's just the truth. And for me, based on what I know. We're paying too little for our water, and we are getting really good services for not enough money, and I know the people working for the government, and they're not making enough. And so you complain that they're not there fast enough and that they don't have a great attitude. They're getting paid about 60% of the private sector. So you get what you pay for, ladies and gentlemen. Level of service. We talk about it all the time. You get to choose. You get to choose. Y'all asked me to speak. I'm just sharing what I think, right? So, all right. So, MHOF ditches to wastewater ditches to MHOF tanks. So, what happened is in the city of Atlanta, according to Franklin Garrett and these other books, is that they started delivering the water, and they got flush toilets, and people didn't know what to do with it. They literally piped it to the front streets and the back streets, and it collected in ditches. Piedmont Park. That's actually an old stream bed right there. And the stories of Piedmont Park is that was a slum ditch. Is that was just where they collected wastewater. And there were just slums. That's just how it was. And they worked, there was a lot of work to increase decrease infant mortality. To increase public health inside of the city of Atlanta and a lot of these slums and areas, because the rich lived on the hills and the poor lived in the gullies with the wastewater ditches. And so Atlanta brought in a German engineer to do citywide planning at the turn of the century in the 1900s. I can't remember his first name, but his last name was Imhoff. It might be on the next slide. But what they are is elevated septic tanks. So the same way you have a septic tank if you live in a more rural area, they basically instituted septic tanks, and they did a few of them across the city, and I'll show you in a minute. And then in 1917, there was a massive, game-changing fire in Atlanta. We always hear about the Chicago fire, but the Atlanta fire was a really big deal, and it affected our city in a really major way. And then in 1918, they added fire suppression on Peachtree because of that, and it really amped up all the water supply in a major way and started really extending water lines, and then all of a sudden it boomed, which it was already sort of booming, but the water sewer situation boomed. So this is a view of an Imhoff tank. This is not one in the city of Atlanta, but it gives you a sense of what they would have looked like below grade. And they had Imhoff tanks at Proctor Creek, which you've probably heard of Proctor Creek on the west side of Atlanta, very impacted by impervious surface. South River, which we talked about just a minute ago, and then Entrenchment Creek. South River and Entrenchment Creek ended up becoming sanitary or CSOs, combined sewer overflow locations, and then Entrenchment Creek has recently been upgraded even further, and they're sending the wastewater to different areas, but I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. And so this, I just wanted to share what the fire looked like. Man, you can't see the streets. All right, so anybody familiar with Auburn Avenue? This is where the Capitol is, right? And then the fire went all the way past Ponce de Leon. No, sorry, that's not Ponce de Leon. Pine Street? I don't even know that one. Oh, y'all know Pine Street? Cool. Glad y'all are better at history than me. And then here's Ponce de Leon, which is really great. If you watch some of the old videos, they pronounce Ponce de Leon different. I don't know, I can't even do it. I'm not even going to try, but they blew these up with dynamite. So this all spread in 6 hours, and they had dynamite brought up from the military, and they blew up houses along Ponce de Leon right here to create a fire break. And that's what stopped the fire in that sector and then came back over there. So it was a devastating thing. This is one of the only known pictures of the Atlanta fires. There's another one that shows all the different chimneys, but it was May 21st of 1917. And then next, we have Asa Candler and a renewed focus on water. This picture was taken, I'm just joking, this is artificial intelligence. So there are no known pictures of the street party. But in 1918, they had a party on Peachtree. They hung flags 100 foot in the air, all down Peachtree from Auburn Avenue to 12th, I think, something around there, 100 foot in the air, and had a party on Peachtree. They turned on the pumps and they shot water up in the air, and they celebrated that Atlanta would never burn down again. In a year and a half time. And with that, once they had that capacity, the water system just started spreading everywhere throughout the city of Atlanta in a really major way. And so there are still pipes in the ground from this era of this revitalization. Also inside of, what did you have right after 1917? You had the boom of the 20s, the roaring 20s. Right? So it was a lot of development in this time period where you see it. But this is actually just a rendering I put inside of DALL-E 2 or 3. I don't know, they keep going up in numbers using ChatGPT and OpenAI just to illustrate what it might have looked like of them celebrating the fact that that they had water on Peachtree. And then now I'm going to switch over to Thirsty City, and the gap's going to get a little bit bigger, and then we'll move into kind of what happened more recently. So in the 1940s and 50s, there was a lot of increased regulation and water rights that started to build up. Who here is familiar with the Georgia Association of Water Professionals? Anybody? Okay, cool. It's a big organization. They have an annual conference every year of over 2,000 people down in Savannah. There's multiple committees. There's Water Environment Federation and then the American Water Works Association. They all come under the umbrella of Georgia. It's actually a really special thing. It's one of the largest state-run organizations in the country for water. It was established during this time period. And a really fun fact there is a lot of the early regulations for water treatment and water operators was surrounded not only in supplying water, but public pools. Isn't that interesting? Yeah. What is the most common waterborne disease in America? Swimmer's ear. Swimmer's ear. And so I grew up in Dallas, Georgia again. The Dallas public pool was the spot during the summer. I mean, think about, and we had air conditioning. Before that wasn't air conditioning. So it was very much a place that people came together. So there was a lot of regulations that started coming about in the 1930s and 40s. The Georgia Department of Public Health, or its precursor, was established at this time in order to really kind of keep Atlanta in line. Atlanta was really big, and they felt like there was some state issue that needed to come in and say, hey, can you just, quit polluting it for the rest of us? That would be great. And so it really increased in that 40s and 50s, but then it shot off in the 1970s with the Clean Water Act. When the Clean Water Act came out, that gave teeth to a lot of the environmental regulations. The rivers had caught on fire. People were paying attention. I wasn't around those days. I'm 37 years old. There's some of the people in the room that were around during a lot of that stuff, but I really do appreciate you stepping up and handling that, because it's made a huge difference, and there's no way I'd be doing that river pump station south of Atlanta if it wasn't for that act to happen, and for all the people that water will serve and change that corridor. It's because of that. But a big thing that came out of that was interbasin transfer, and that's a huge deal for Atlanta, much bigger deal than in other places, because we sit on that plateau and that intercontinental divide. We are transferring water from the Chattahoochee from basically the Gulf of Mexico to the Atlantic Ocean a lot, and we really had to think about that in a major way in Georgia, and we're still thinking about that. What's going on with Lake Lanier right now is a lot of the utilities are having to return flows back to the Lake Lanier bucket. And that is just another form of interbasin transfer. Important. If we take the water out of one watershed, we should attempt to put it back in that watershed to the best of our ability to maintain the ecosystem downstream. And then in the 2000s, the interstate water wars. They are not completely over, but Georgia did pretty well. And so EPD is now opening up a few more permits if done in the right way, and we'll maybe get a chance to talk about that a little bit too. So history is long and winding. You can't see this exactly, but there's been a whole bunch of improvements through the years. The original water reclamation facilities were built in the 1930s. New Deal, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and a lot of the funding that came about in those years was instrumental in establishing the first round of wastewater treatment plants for our city. South River, which is located, the headwaters of South River is actually located under Delta right now. There's a whole podcast called Finding the Flint that is spectacular. And there's a whole bunch of people doing a lot of stuff inside of the city related to that. But one of the fun stories I'll tell you about the interbasin transfer and that original thing, there was a plant that was put down at the airport called the Flint wastewater treatment plant in that time frame, and then expanded into the 1960s. And it had Venturi pumps. Anybody familiar with what a Venturi is from Bernoulli's equation, right? So if flow is moving fast, the pressure goes right. I tried to trick y'all. Yeah. And so what is cool is that in Venturi tube, one of the other special things about it is it recovers its head. It recovers its pressure loss. So when you neck down, the outer neck is designed perfectly to have the least amount of head loss as possible. Well, what that also means is if you start a Venturi, the Venturi will continue. It's a self-priming thing. And so they actually had original Venturi pumps all over this wastewater treatment plant because they were thinking about how much they didn't want to have mechanical equipment inside of their plants. Who's the #1 water user in the country? The power industry. Who's the #1 power user in the country? The water industry. Our blowers at wastewater treatment facilities, the pumps for water is just sucking power all the time. That's why most of them are generally public good utilities, right? Because they're inextricably connected in a major way. And that's why we work so closely with them, with our intakes and all those other things. But when interbasin transfer came along, they had to shut that entire wastewater treatment plant down. 1970s. And those Venturi pumps I was talking about works great unless it's wastewater. Those things would mess up all the time. There's all kinds of stories about it. It just didn't really work right. Engineers having great ideas on paper, right? A little bit harder to apply. Now there's a force main that sends the water all the way up to South River. And I'll explain that on the next one. But in 2019, the Bellwood Quarry opened. Golly, that is so whitewashed. Y'all can't see anything. All right, there's Zoo Atlanta. Everybody know where Zoo Atlanta is? All right, cool. We'll bounce around from Zoo Atlanta. So the major things I wanted to point out are RM Clayton Wastewater Treatment Plant, which is the largest wastewater treatment plant in the southeastern United States. And with that, you have the water plant, the Chattahoochee water plant that's right here, and then they've got Hemp Hill actually pretty close. The Bellwood Quarry, that they used a quarry that was no longer in use, filled it up with water. There's a whole tunnel. They called it Driller Mike, the tunnel boring machine that drilled all the way under, and it has actually been working and operational for the last couple years, and there's a really nice park located there. You have Utoy Creek wastewater treatment plant. That's the other big one that I wanted to make sure I pointed out. That's discharging into the Chattahoochee. And then you have South River WRC. So this is the airport down here. That Flint River wastewater treatment plant I was talking about actually pumps up to South River and then goes into a tunnel, and then that tunnel goes all the way across and then goes back into the Chattahoochee River. So inside of Atlanta, we're pulling from the Chattahoochee up here. It's then going down, it's being collected into South River, and then being put into a tunnel all the way back over to the Chattahoochee to return the water. Yeah, and so we're going to talk a little bit more at the end about some of the challenges going on, but that's the big three, are those three wastewater treatment plants and a lot of the issues that they're dealing with on the wastewater side of things, because we're going to talk about the water, but the wastewater situation is not an insignificant thing that the city of Atlanta faces right now. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into a rough 2024. So on Friday, May 31st, a main break was reported on the west side of Atlanta at this dot right here, at an intersection of two roads. The roads don't matter for this particular conversation, but I wanted to give you some context of where the heck we are. This is the Hemp Hill Water Treatment Plant. Make sure I'm circling the right thing. I'm sorry. That is the Hemp Hill Water Treatment Plant. And so that is that pump station I was talking about that's really supplying most of Atlanta. Well, when this main break occurred, it occurred in the early morning hours of that Friday, and they initially reported that it was at the intersection of three major transmission mains. Al Wiggins is the acting commissioner. I think he may be the official commissioner now. There's been a little bit of transition, but Makita Brown was the previous commissioner that had left earlier this year. So he was relatively new in the job, gets on on the news, and they had made a decision that they were not going to shut everything down until 5 p.m. that afternoon to give people time to plan. At the time, they didn't know how long the break was going to be, the repair was going to be, but they knew it was a significant situation in a significant area, and they told people there may be a boil water advisory. I have the videos, but we're kind of running out of time, so I don't want to like go into every single one of the videos. But I think it's important. I thought he did an excellent job of being on message and explaining what was happening inside the water system. Really easy to judge what all is going on. This is I'm speaking to a bunch of engineers. This is a very complicated system. There's a lot of unknowns. You do not want to go out there and start telling people how fast it's going to be turned back on. You report what you know, you do your best along the way, and I thought he did a wonderful job on the presentations early on Friday. So then they started the repairs at 5 o'clock and they proceeded through the night. Well, in that time, there was another break on the west side. Oh, sorry, my bad. The situation was assessed. I got ahead of myself. The situation was assessed prior to the repair. The intersection of 3 major trunk lines that were 80 plus years old. This was the original boil water area, impacted area that was actually put out later. They did not put that out at the time of the break. Crews were mobilized. There were actually some crews that were sent home according to the interviews, and they prepared for 5 o'clock and then to work all overnight to assess the situation. Remember, they got to turn it off in order to even get in to see what has happened there before they can even do anything. Then the repair was made overnight, and then the next day, on Saturday morning, they started to repressurize the system in the area. But the public is not so kind. That is not how things work for us sometimes as engineers. So on Saturday, June 1st, while that was happening, a second break occurred overnight. And that second break occurred right here with the red dot in the heart of Midtown. So this break happened, they repaired it. Unfortunately, another break happened, and as far as the news was concerned, it was all one huge disaster that was compounding. So this is actually a picture on the right. They posted later of the pipe that was pulled from the ground. It was over 80 years old. I doubt very seriously that gate valve was ever going to open. That's called a gate valve. And then this is the repair of the area once completed.
Do you think it's possible that the lack of pressure and then repressurization may have contributed to this?
Absolutely. You can't say definitely that it did, but you can say that what happens when a system is pressurized and depressurized. I worked on the Richland Creek supply program in Paulding, where they switched from Cobb County, Marietta to Paulding water. We did a whole bunch of stuff about how the water was going to change directions, so we knew the most likely places for it to break. The interesting thing about it is when you pressurize and repressurize, the pipe moves in an opposite direction than it's moved for the last 80 years. And that change of direction can cause a little bit of space next to the pipe, and what restrains a pipe in these old pipes, the ground. We have new restrained joint fittings and all these special, they didn't have that 80 years ago. They made a bell and they shoved the pipe in and put it under the ground, and it held the dang water. A lot of times they actually poured lead to seal it, and there's reports of that's what they did from the original Chattahoochee intake to Hemp Hill. So it absolutely could have, but you couldn't really tell definitely. And in that time period, they had other breaks. State of Atlanta's got breaks all the time. This is a 100-plus-year-old system. There's breaks happening continually. They have a lot of people that work for City of Atlanta too. A lot of people don't realize how big that organization truly is. A lot of things to handle. So then moving into Sunday, June 2nd, they started draining the lines on this area. So they got this repair done relatively quickly, from my opinion, of the things that I know, but this area challenged them. And from all the reports that they were putting out, the issue was they couldn't isolate it, because where this break happened, there was a valve and that was just right there. And so they couldn't get it isolated. So they spent a lot of time around the area trying to get it to isolate on Sunday. And then by Monday morning, this is the actual zone for the boil water advisory. And then this is a picture of the original boil water advisory that I showed you of the multiple trunk lines. This is how much smaller it was on the second. But again, news doesn't care, right? This is just selling papers at this point. right? Everybody's paying attention. You got, like, these days in 2024, I'm just telling you, my great-grandmother just came back to live with my mom and dad. She, like, just will listen to anybody on YouTube, on the internet, like the news and things. So I'm telling you, like, my generation in 2024, we don't trust nothing. Right? It's like, you got to tell us, we got to see it from 7 different sources, right? You really got to take that mentality. And a lot of people in this room know this. We're professional engineers. This is what we do. Our stuff just gets turned on us from time to time. But this was the case. They had reduced this down, and they were attacking that break. And they ended up finding out that it was a part that they didn't have, because it was a big older part. They actually had to have it brought in from Alabama. And so they went to, I'm not 100% sure, I couldn't find it officially, but I think it was Birmingham Waterworks Board, because they also have big infrastructure like Atlanta does. And they had police escort to bring that part back into Atlanta. And then the Atlanta PD picked it up right when they hit their precinct to bring that thing. It gives me chills. I'm a water engineer through my core. And that's what this is. This is public health and ability for people to do the things that they need to do on the daily and not think about their water. And if for a moment there, people recognized again how special that is, and really how fast it can be taken away is the other side. There's certain things I can't talk about, but the Super Bowl, right? When everybody was coming in, we got the college playoffs next year. We got FIFA the year after that. We got Ace 28 that all y'all know about now. It's gonna be like 14 people at it. You know, like, a lot of people come to Atlanta. We got to keep them safe. This is our city, right? And it can be taken away at any moment. And for a moment there, people kind of recognize that. Maybe not exactly what you thought you was gonna hear from the presentation today. I'm like over here, hey, it's cool that this happened. Not exactly. City of Atlanta needs some things to work on for sure, but with all this, you know, I just like to be honest about it. So this is Wednesday as it's brought in. You have the same boil water zone. At this point, they had gotten really good at communicating out to the public of what's happening while the news is eating it up and trying to blame it on somebody. But on Thursday, June 6th, the boil water was restored. City of Atlanta has since engaged with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I'm going to talk about Benjamin Moss opinions. This is not something I know, but here's what I think is happening. They do assessments in Atlanta like all the time. It's just part of being a system that big. I think they do it too much, quite honestly. I'm a, all right, you looked at it, build it kind of person. We got to replace the assets and quit analyzing it till the cows come home. There's a point that's good enough, and then replace it, right? John's over here. I talk about this at Garver all the time. It's like, I don't want to hear, like, okay, you analyze it, replace it. Like, that's fine. It's, you know, that's the problem that's affecting our country right now, our state and our communities, is that we're over analyzing because we're scared to death to get sued. We gotta get the stuff fixed and revitalized in the ground, above ground, and everything else. It's deteriorating every day, right? And so we gotta quit like mulling it over, you know? Like, so U.S. Army Corps of Engineers was brought in. The last I heard was a $2 million contract to assess again. But here's the key of that, is that there's a lot of conversation going on right now in Georgia around where federal dollars are being spent. How it works is the dollars are allocated at the federal level, and then they go to two buckets. They're either direct allocated through the Appropriations Committee on the federal side, so that's John Ossoff and Warnock here in Georgia, and then our federal representatives, they can maybe get things earmarked, direct funding. This could be like things at Lake Lanier, things related to the Corps of Engineers, things that are major water supplies that are regionalized, and then the other one is the State Revolving Fund. And in Georgia, that's managed by the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority, or GEFA. GEFA is an executive branch function. Very important to understand that. EPD is also an executive branch function. All right. GEFA has decided in 2024 they are no longer funding large utility loans. This year they decided that. They are going to go back to their original edict, which was to fund small utilities that do not have the ratepayers to go to the bond market. That's the choice. This is America. I kind of like it this way. Let's fight about it. Let's talk about it. Is this the right solution or is it not the right solution? But that's a big conversation that's going on right now of how much should the federal government be allocating directly to places, how much should GEFA be funding, and then how much should the utilities be going to the bond market? And this also goes back to regionalization. So in Georgia, we were established around cities early on. Then counties have sort of gotten bigger than the cities in a lot of places, although cities are still supplying water and treating wastewater. But then we now have authorities all across the state, which are serving larger areas, which have larger, they can group together with more ratepayers. They can go to the bond market. Honestly, I'm 37 years old. I'm learning like crazy. I don't know the answer to that question. I really don't. But I know I've sat down with the GFA director, I've sat down with the EPA director, I've sat down with all these people to talk about it, because I think we need to be discussing this as a state of how we're going to move forward, because these are massive challenges. So why did they go to the Army Corps of Engineers? I think the reason they did that is so that they would have a better standing when they go to get direct appropriations from the federal government, because Andre Dickens got up there and said, it's a big number, it's a number with a B. Listen, I'm a water wastewater engineer, it's lots of B's. I ain't afraid to say it, right? Like, it's lots of B's. This is a ton of money. And at the end of the day, we've got to figure out a way to do it, or we just decide not to, and we just let it fall and collapse into the ground. And I'm 37 years old, and I got 2 young kids at home. I'm not really cool with that. I got a lot of life left to live. I'm going to work to 2051. Water 2050 is the whole thing with AWWA. I'm working to 2051 just to prove a point. And then this was actually really cool. They set up a $5 million fund for all the impacted businesses. So I can't show every video, there's only so much time, but when the second one happened in Midtown, it literally, a geyser went into a couple of restaurants and like messed stuff up. And it messed up a whole lot of business in that period of time. And so they established that $5 million fund that they could go back to. If only City of Atlanta like 10 years ago could just allocate more things to get things fixed instead of doing it that way. Even City of Atlanta people would agree with that. Like, we want to do better with that. We just got to do it. We got to spend the money. Like, we have to. And there's back to is I think my taxes need to be a little higher. Not too high. I just love to say that. It just gets such a reaction out of people. Yeah. And my water bill is too low. I live in Cobb County. They need to raise them rates.
Well, pay the City of Atlanta water rates.
Oh, yeah. The City of Atlanta is a little higher, but...
Sandy Springs and pay a premium.
Let's talk about City of Atlanta, why y'all's water bill should be higher, actually. I'll explain that. So, this is some crazy stuff, all right? This is really what's going on in the water world right now that you may not be aware of, but this is a serious thing that is going on, and I think it's getting worse until hopefully it gets better. Big Creek wastewater discharge, 2023 discharge, released millions of gallons of wastewater in June of 2023 and actually shut down the national park area along Powers Island to Paces Mill on 4th of July in Atlanta. Did y'all even know that? So people know, like I was like at the top of my lungs, we have just let the City of Atlanta's waterway that I jumped off the cliffs. Like, has anybody else jumped off the cliffs? All right, thank you. Yeah, Devil's Granite, Devil's Raceway, Chattahoochee. It's a special place if you've never been there. And it's a place that we could be celebrating and people would actually come and visit inside of Atlanta if it wasn't dirty.
What happened?
What happened? Yeah, so...
before you say that, clarification, Big Creek is Fulton County, it's not City.
Correct, but it's highlighting the Chattahoochee corridor north of Atlanta. Yeah, I tried to do it as water in North Georgia. Exactly, though. It's not City of Atlanta. This is a Georgia issue. I don't want to pick on Atlanta. This is a Georgia issue of dealing with a lot of population growth and dilapidating, non-invested in infrastructure. All right? And so Big Creek is North Fulton, and they're going through a big wastewater upgrade, which is great. They're putting in membranes, flat plate membranes, which will be a direct protection for the Chattahoochee River. EPD's done a great job with the phosphorus limits. They're going after nitrogen side of the rivers to protect the rivers even more. But this is a big deal. And it shut down outdoor activities on the Chattahoochee through the 4th of July for 3 weeks. They were only fined $21,000 for that mess up.
Cost of copying.
Yeah. And with that, again, I'm not going to pick on the people. I know those people through my work with the association. That's just not right. now it's not any person in particular, but $21,000 to shut that down. There was toilet paper found in the river by the Chattahoochee River Keeper. There's still, I don't know exactly what happened. There's a lot of talk about, was it bypassed because of something going on? There was talk that they lost the bugs, which in the wastewater treatment thing can affect things, but if you have filtration and disinfection, it sure wouldn't cause toilet paper and E. coli getting through. It's kind of confusing, but they definitely did discharge into the Chattahoochee for that period of time, and it definitely shut them down, and they were definitely fined $21,000 for that. So that was just last year in the summer, and then Chattahoochee River Keeper discovers and documents wastewater discharge from R.M. Clayton. And R.M. Clayton is located right here. Big Creek was up in this area down the Chattahoochee River. It's flowing that way through the city. They informed the city of Atlanta of their monitoring results, and then in July of 2024 issued an intent, sorry, it's not written right, intent to sue, which is required under the Clean Water Act to provide a 60-day notice for that intent to sue. And on that, I actually am going to play a video. It should take me, I don't know how much you'll be able to hear and see though. Let me see if I can't get it over there. All right, and this is on their LinkedIn page.
Put the microphone near the
Yeah, that one maybe. But this will actually at least show it.
You gotta flip the switch.
Okay, this is the. Where's it? Is it on yours? You think?
Yeah,
It's okay. Y'all can still see. Just focus on the video, and I'll just talk over it. So now I gotta minimize it again.
seeing the audio show up here.
There we go. All right, so this is the executive director of the Chattahoochee River Keeper. They have 300 people that volunteer to take samples almost, I think it's weekly, or every single day. But this is them at that discharge, documenting what they're seeing at the discharge.
Right now, just downstream of Atlanta Road, where RM
They have a really cool jet boat that actually allows them to get around the Chattahoochee. It actually goes back to Shirley Franklin, and there's actually a recent documentary, but look at this.
80 million gallons per day. Unfortunately, we've had a lack of communication and cooperation from the city, and because of that, we just filed a lawsuit.
This is basically
against the city of
just
Atlanta
saying that they're doing the
accountable.
intent to sue. And maybe I don't need to play this one because it's just going to say that they filed it. Sorry, can't see it. But I did at least include a picture of what it looked like. That's coming out into the Chattahoochee River at the time that they were there taking those samples. This wastewater treatment facility reportedly is releasing like 40 to 60 MGD. It's permitted up to 100 million gallons a day. Sorry, MGD, million gallons a day into the Chattahoochee. It's not that big of a river, ladies and gentlemen, for that kind of discharge within it. The Chattahoochee River Keeper has documented reductions in dissolved oxygen downstream. It's a big deal, and it is not okay that this is happening in 2024. And I'm trying to get the word out that it is happening, but that could be a reason why water rates maybe should go up in Atlanta is to fix that, but maybe right, maybe not. So get the funding right. Is a really great path forward. The previous CFO of Atlanta is currently either indicted or in jail. The previous commissioner, 2 commissioners ago, Joanna Macrina, was in jail. She was real involved with ASE actually back in the day. Past president, I think, yeah. So I mean, you know, they've struggled, and if you argue why they didn't get a lot of stuff through, some people have argued it's procurement. Well, I might be a little shy to sign checks too if my previous predecessor went to federal prison, you know, and so.
You'd have to take the bribe.
Huh?
You'd have to take the
Yeah, to take the bribe. Yeah, don't take the bribe. Always a good policy. But there are a lot of good people that work there that have tried hard. Most people that I know that have went to work there or have spent time working there went there because they thought they could make a big difference. It's just like what you read on the news. It's not everybody. Start rebuilding and repair things quickly, and then protect our waters and plan for proper growth. This is that new intake I was talking about. First water supply intake in the Chattahoochee south of Atlanta that we know of, that's north of Columbus, for water supply. And the reason why that wasn't possible is because the Chattahoochee was septic. Nothing lived in it. And then a group of Georgians got together and said, this is not okay, and we're going to do better, and we're going to clean up this river. My parents used to raft down the Chattahoochee because you couldn't get in the water. By the time I was in college, we could get in the water, and it felt good to get in the water during the hot Georgia summer, right? Are we moving back to a time where you can't get in the water? Are we okay with going back to a time when we can't get in the water? Additionally, this entire community south of Atlanta that has relied on the Flint River and the small tributaries of the Flint River, the small tributaries of the Chattahoochee south of Atlanta, have been water starved. It has affected the ability for industry to be down there. It has affected opportunities for people's children and grandchildren to stay in that area, because there haven't been as many opportunities south of Atlanta because of the water situation. This new intake changes everything about that area. I will never forget going to Twin Falls, Idaho on my way to Yellowstone, and there was a dam. And in that dam, or at that dam, there was a monument to a man that had envisioned this dam there. It changed the whole area. It was all green where it was previously like scorched high desert, right? That's same guy, different name, sort of existed in the Grand Canyon area. And he wanted to put a dam in the Grand Canyon because it would change the whole area, right? One person is lifted up and there's a statue of him. The other person is vilified as horrible. That is our place as engineers. We do not get to decide what goes in every time. We can advocate, we can say what we think and provide our recommendations, but at the end of the day, the people decide, and the elected officials of those people decide. Well, the same thing with that statue and all of that, in Atlanta and in Georgia right now, I would argue that we are facing a bit of a turning point with water-related issues. We have grown significantly, and our infrastructure has deteriorated, and this is not a unique problem. This problem has happened everywhere else, but I think we could be unique. And I think that we could just go decide to solve it and say that we're not okay with the Chattahoochee going septic again. We're not okay with people discharging into this river knowingly or halfway knowingly. And so there's ways you can get involved. And so the Basin Advisory Council and the Metropolitan Water Planning District that I talked about earlier would love for you to get involved with that. Figure out where your water goes, your stormwater. If you pour out a bottle in your front yard, where does it go? Does it go to the Chattahoochee River? Does it go to South River? Does it go to entrenchment? And then how could you get involved with your local watershed to prevent significant pollution from basically affecting our home over time. Last thing I want to show you, just for fun, in order to win this job in South Atlanta, we came up with a really cool way to go about constructing it. And I worked on another river intake on the Etowah River, and recognized that there was a very big dry season in Georgia. From basically September through December, early December, we have a dry season. We have a very wet season in January, February, March, April. And you can actually see that up on the top. That's actually modeling, this is just 1 year of water surface elevation inside of the Chattahoochee River, and you can see that it's much more flat during this period of time. So we actually designed the project during the wet season, and then we're having it constructed during the dry season right now, and they're actually in the Chattahoochee building this new intake right now. It'll supply 27 million gallons per day to the Coweta County Water and Sewage Authority, which is supplying the region southwest of Atlanta. And you can see that they're constructing there, and then we're going to zoom out in a second. And we actually modeled the 2009 flood that occurred. And you can actually see the water lapping the bridge in the distance there. And we put the pump station way back off of the river so that during that flood stage, we can still provide water to the Coweta County Water and Sewage Authority. I just thought it was interesting. One of those neat things that we modeled that most Georgians really appreciate seeing the 2009 flood. So
there's a huge ability to regulate the water levels and water flow in the Chattahoochee with the Buford Dam, and I hike often in the East Palisades and so forth.
Oh yeah.
So during the week, the river has been extraordinarily low. Would this construction downstream of this water?
You want to restate the question to the mic?
Okay, you got it. Okay.
Is this on?
Check 2, 3.
I've noticed that the Chattahoochee River during the week is it's got extraordinarily low water levels. All the shoals are out of the water. There's very minimal flow. Could that have something to do with this downstream water intake construction? Are they low for that?
I'll tell you this, I've worked on multiple construction projects on rivers, and we would have had a lot more success if the Corps gave 2 craps what we were doing. The Corps does what the Corps wants to do. They have power generation schedules and put things out on flow, so it has nothing to do with that intake. If it did, I would actually be the one advocating to keep it low for a little bit so that we could decrease total construction costs for the ratepayers of Coweta County Water and Sewage Authority.
Yeah. We had a lot of rain like a week or 2 ago.
Yeah, so
5 or 6 inches of rain.
for those that watch the water and how the rivers work, Georgia is localized watersheds, like there's a lot, and so you could get a lot of water up in North Georgia around Helen, and that's a pretty small like watershed that goes into Lanier, but it still can contribute. But the dam, they're usually holding that back, but then you can get a ton of water in Atlanta south of Buford Dam, and there's no way to stop it, and it's just gonna roll, but it'll roll pretty quick, right? And so there's a bunch of stuff on it. I wish that I understood perfectly. I've got our team working on it to really understand a little bit better of the different rain amounts and how it affects the river elevation. Honestly, to give a water quality perspective to the authority as they go to treat this new water. So, but yeah, it's climate dependent mostly, especially with the Lanier, because Lanier stays more level. Allatoona is actually way more regulated on floods because of the Oostanala coming in at Rome. So they hold back Allatoona a lot of times to let the Oostanala roll through to the Coosa into Alabama to not flood Rome. Fun facts, before Allatoona Dam was constructed, Carsville flooded all the time. Carsville hasn't flooded since Allatoona Dam was constructed. Or that I know of, it hasn't. Jeez, it's on YouTube. Any other questions related to this? Yeah, I'm done. Oh yeah, sorry. Last slide. Thank you. Yeah. This guy did not present. He's gonna be mad if his name's on there and this YouTube goes viral. Andy had no part in this presentation.
What are they doing to clean that mess up?
Wait.
Yeah, great question. Yeah, you gotta ask it to them. Yep. Oh, you want me to? Oh yeah. He asked, what are they doing to clean that mess up? So a lot, actually. I should have put that probably more in the presentation. So the stories is that when the Riverkeeper came in to RM Clayton, that the secondary clarifiers were all backed up. The secondary clarifiers, basically the clean water goes over the top and then goes to the last treatment step or disinfection, and then the last bit of solids accumulate at the bottom. When they came on site, they were all full and non-operational. They, according to the Riverkeeper's posting, they alleged that it was due to some heavy rains earlier in the year. But they don't think that that's 100% likely. The Riverkeeper has also said that the people a part of this process with suing RM Clayton and stuff are actually previous operators of RM Clayton that are as upset as anybody that this has gotten to the state that it has. I will say though, I'm going to keep going back to this. City of Atlanta is not like the only one dealing with this. It's a lot of big infrastructure. It costs a lot of money, and there's not a lot of public willpower to do this stuff. So what I think is also occurring is that Georgia EPD has instituted this new asset management plan that anybody permanent in the state has to develop. And it has 4 parts. And those 4 parts basically add up to what rate should you be setting for your water and wastewater for your utility to not make money. These are not for profit, but to sustain themselves long term. And the idea is, in my mind, if I was an elected official, is that I could point to this EPD regulation for the asset management plan, and they'll take away my permit if I don't do this right. And so it gives them a little bit of political protection in order to get these things through, because the story is over and over again, and I'm 37, so I haven't been through this a million times over, is that anytime they go up and say, hey, we need to raise rates, hey, we got to do this, that they're immediately out of office. And so what do you do? What do you do if you're in that place when you're trying to work on the greater good? It's difficult. John? Oh, you got to, yeah, there. Man, I thought I didn't have enough material for an hour.
So just, you mentioned at the very end, stormwater.
Oh, yeah.
Now that's a deal in Cobb County in terms of potential new taxes, but how does that play into
call
this?
It a tax?
Yeah.
Is it a tax or a fee?
Yeah, fees, right?
Well done.
How's it all play into this, what the topic was tonight with wastewater?
Oh, yeah. So it's actually, I would just call it water. There's this whole new thing, and we call it one water, because it all is, at the end of the day, one water. Everybody's probably seen the thing of the small percentage it's actually drinkable fresh water compared to, the total water supply. Well, what makes Georgia really special is that most of our water that we use in Georgia falls in Georgia. There are 2 little areas of the Tennessee River in North Georgia that are Tennessee River watersheds that they actually use water that doesn't fall in Georgia. Everything else, the Etowah, the Oosanala, all the rivers, Chattahoochee, on and on. The water falls in Georgia. And what makes it special is we're kind of the bottom of the Appalachian Mountains, right? So the clouds are coming from west to east. They hit the mountains, they go upward, and then it rains, right? And so we get a lot of rain in North Georgia. We get much more rain than Seattle does. They get more rain days, but we get a lot more rain. And so stormwater is incredibly important to our state. If I would have started talking about stormwater, we would have needed 2 hours for the presentation. So, because it is absolutely interconnected, and a lot of the stuff with the Atlanta Regional Commission and the Metropolitan Water Planning District is related to stormwater, because we've done really good work on our point sources. We know where they are. We need to work on getting them back, like in permit, in a way that we trust, because they're saying they're in permit, but do we really trust it when we stand pictures like that? But non-point sources with stormwater is a massive piece of our pollution inside of our rivers. I tell another divisive, fun story, go back to my taxes should be higher. Lake Echelon in Washington State. If you go from Seattle through the middle of the state, there's this beautiful mountain lake. People live right up on the lake, right there. And the lake is pristine and beautiful. It's also illegal to wash your car. We all sign a social contract every single day. And if we thought about our water in terms of that social contract, you might be more willing to go pay $20 and get your car washed instead of dumping it into the local storm drain, which goes into the lake that you overlook that your grandkids swim in. Oh, but our grandkids can't swim in our water, so we don't even have to think about it. So that's stormwater, and it's a massive deal. There's a lot of stuff on the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District's website. They're going to give you the microphone. I've been trained. I'm going to take Andy's name off this right real quick. He's going to be like...
I really want to say thank you very much for the presentation and for the information. A couple of things really did stand out for me, but one of the things as an action item is that you have to turn up the volume. The loudest people in the room really don't need a mic.
Right.
But you've got to start showing up down into the Gold Dome and start saying this is not okay.
Yeah.
And because when we hear more from the people in this room, it gives us more of the power that we need to be able to get our colleagues on board. We may not be able to do things as quickly as we would like to, but as an advocate, I know what the power of the voice is, and I tell people we have the power of the pen, but you have the power of the voice. And when we both come together, we can get some things done. The other thing I'd like to ask is, usually what water I like, it comes from from Flowvilla and Indian Creek, Indian Springs. What is the deal with that whole sulfur?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay.
I don't know much about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Last question for the day?
Yes.
Add on like what is being done. I think for the power plant in 2028, there's going to be ZLD, zero liquid discharge.
Oh, yeah.
Rules is coming on, so I think more and more things are being done. And I remember we did go to City of Atlanta. They're spending quite a bit of money to upgrade all these water treatment plant. The only problem is we all went down to the bid, and nobody bid on any of the project because of the lack of information or lack of scope of the work. Just wanted to share.
Yeah, I will say that I work a lot with the people that work for the government, trying to get these things out. Doing an RFP and like getting all those documents ready and putting that out is not a small task. It truly is. It's hard to get those things out and to get them moving. I think about them a lot. I definitely encourage them, as much as I can, but that is not an easy task. You mentioned something about conservation, about zero discharge, and I just want to mention one other thing from that book, Thirsty City. Boston had a half billion gallon water plant expansion on the books. It was going to be, let's just say $1 billion, just for example's sake, in order to increase the capacity of that water plant. Well, instead, they took a year and they spent $50 million doing conservation, of working with low flow fixtures, trying to change the zoning around new development, getting people to think about like being efficient with it. Efficient. I love baths. My wife loves baths. We're water engineers. I enjoy my water. I love my water. It's something I cherish to be able to enjoy it. I'm not saying you can't enjoy a good, long, hot shower or cold winter in the summer. But at the same time, if we think about how we're conserving as a population, it can make a massive difference. And so the Metropolitan Water Planning District, when they were established in the early 2000s, in order to win the water war, or at least fight the water war, have made incredible strides around reducing the overall capacity needs for our system, and it's made a huge difference. But one of the interesting side effects of that is it's causing the wastewater to be further concentrated. So our wastewater used to be more diluted, now it's more concentrated waste. We can handle that problem though, ladies and gentlemen. We can handle that problem, right? With funding we can actually, it's not an unsolvable problem. But yeah, so there's a lot of stuff related to that conservation. Again, I'm just going to encourage you, the Metropolitan Water Planning District and your basin advisory councils, a great place to just learn more about this stuff of what's going on in and around your watershed, and you might find something you're passionate about, or at least maybe find your voice, or find somebody else that wants your voice. Here's the thing that I would challenge back to that. I'm speaking to the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers. If I was invited to speak at a place that I didn't feel as comfortable because I am a professional engineer, I would be afraid they would take what I said and misconstrue it or paint me as something. And I'm running a business and I got young children, and it's difficult. And so I'm working in my life to get financially independent, where I can make those decisions without affecting my kids' ability to play Little League. That's just kind of where we're at today, but I'm just communicating that and putting it out in the world. I'm a 37-year-old man, and I'm scared because there's craziness going on out there, ladies and gentlemen. It is scary. People are vilifying people. We're not talking about the issues. We're not talking about what's going on. We're just hating. and we have got to stop that. This is a wonderful country. It's a wonderful state, and it's a wonderful community. Thank you for having me speak today. I am proud to be a professional engineer. Thank you for letting me talk a little bit about something I'm super passionate about. I wish I had more time to put this presentation together. I could. Yeah.
This is the reason why we have to have these conversations.
I know. Yeah.
Because if we as the people that can actually influence the laws don't know what you're feeling,
right,
then we make laws based on our own limited knowledge.
Yeah.
So you have people and allies in the room that there's more for you that want to protect you as being a dad and want to see you around than those that are just trying to do the opposite. So we have to hear that, because when we tell the story, we don't get as much rah-rah as them to hear from you.
Yeah. Thank you.
But it has been a great presentation. We learned a lot. You had also interest in the awareness and the need to get involved. This is our state, this is our country, and we get to say, right?
Yep.
So, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And on behalf of the I'd like to give you the small gift appreciation.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation given at one of the Atlanta Metro chapter meetings of the Georgia Society of Professional Engineers, an affiliate of the National Society of Professional Engineers. To find out more about us or to join us, check us out at gspe.org.